So something else that would be good to kind of look at here is now that we've started to take a look at some of these files, we looked at the sudoers file, but we also started looking at things like the passwd file, the groups file, the shadow file. And when we were looking at these files, like these files had a lot of data. Right. When I did something like when I cat out the groups file, like etc groups, when I looked at this, like there was information that went way off the terminal, right, way off of one screen. I had to scroll up and down. Right, there was a lot of information to kind of look at. And same thing, of course, with when we were looking at stuff like when I did something like /etc/passwd, it's like, again, I've got multiple lines of data, way more than what I was really interested in, okay? So I want to kind of start to show some techniques that are useful for managing what do you do when you've got lots of data and lots of output, okay? And the answer kind of here is, well, there is a command that you can use to be able to scroll up and down through your output without using the mouse. And that something like this is going to be extremely helpful when you're on a system such as the CentOS systems. The CentOS systems that don't have a GUI, when all they have is a command line, it's like you don't have a mouse to be able to scroll back up. So if you needed to see output at the top, it becomes very useful to know, like, how can I read information, but I'm not going to, use my mouse and scroll up and down through it. And the answer is that there is a less command and a more command, less and more. And personally, I prefer less. I think less is a little bit more appropriate for what people want most of the time. So if you use the less command to go reading one of your files, this will take a look at your output in a slightly different way. So let's give it a try. So how about I do something like less of /etc/group. And you'll see now what it does is you're looking at the output, but it starts you all the way at the top. Like now I'm at the very top of my output. And you can use your arrow keys now. All right, so I'm using the arrow keys on the keyboard, and now I can scroll up and down through the output. All right, and so this is much better for when you have a bunch of output and you want the stuff at the top, or you have a bunch of output and it's like, well, I need a minute. I need to actually look through this to try to find something I'm looking for. And your page up and page down buttons will also work if you need to jump up and down through the data. So you looking at data using the less command is a very, very critical thing when all that you have is a command line interface. Now, you kind of see it's similar to VI right now, or similar to Vim in the sense that, you kind of have the colon there at the bottom, and you're sort of just like locked in, right? It just says end when you get to the bottom, and you can't actually get back until you press Q. So if you ever kind of get like locked into a command, it's kind of a nice little thing to guess. Like, let me try guessing. I'll press the Q button, and sometimes that'll quit out of whatever it is that's kind of got you locked in and take you back to the terminal. So yeah, you can exit less mode by pressing the Q on the keyboard. All right, so very useful technique here to be able to do this. And so yeah, looking at files using less might be something that's a little bit more appropriate. I want to show another technique, though, that's also really, really useful for trying to do something like this. And so that's the idea of something like this. Like sometimes you have a command that generates a lot of output. Like my cat command just generated a lot of output, right? So if you have a command that generates a lot of output, you can take that output and send it to the less command. All right, so understanding other ways to redirect data. This is a really critical thing to start learning how to do. So yes, you can run less directly on the file, right? We would just say less and then the name of the file. Now, if you had a command that generated the data, all right, so if you had some command that generated that, you can take the data that the command generated and send that to the less command. All right, now you don't use the arrow keys like what we did before. That would end up trying to send it to a file called less. That's not what we want to do. We want to send it to a command. And so in Linux, we call this piping. I'm going to take information and pipe it to somewhere else. Okay, and so we're gonna use the pipe symbol, which is Shift and then the button above Enter, the vertical bar. Okay. So if you do any type of command that has output, you can take that output and send it to another command. And so it's kind of a silly little way. It's kind of a roundabout way right now to use the less command, but I just want to get some practice doing this. So if I got a command that produces a bunch of output, let's take that output and send it to less. All right, and so now I'm redirecting my output so that it won't just come right here to the terminal. It'll go to the less command, and then the less command will be the one to actually display this at the terminal. So let's give this a try. Okay, and now we kind of get the same result here, of course, where it's just me and the data. here's me, here's my data, and now I can kind of scroll up and scroll down. And you can do this with pretty much any command. Okay, yeah, there are kind of some exceptions. You got to learn a little bit more about the nuance, but for the most part, with the commands that I've shown thus far, like, yeah, this will work. All right, so if I wanted to do something like ls of slash, right, ls of slash, like, hey, there's some output. What if I wanted to actually, scroll up and down through the output? It's like, well, I could take that output and pipe that to less. All right, let's give that a try. And you see, there it is. There's all the output, and I can scroll up and down through all of the output. All right, so any of our commands right now, if you ever have data that just goes off the screen that's way too much to look at, try taking that data and piping it to less. And when you send the data to the less command, now it becomes something that's like just you and the data. You can scroll up and down and be able to see it. Especially when you start running lots of commands and the data keeps going way off the screen. It's like, wait, where did it start? Whoop, did I go past it? Wait, where is it? Where am I? This is stressful. This is not what I want. All right, so learning how to send things to the less command. The slash etc location, that would be another, right? ls of slash etc, that's one that produces a lot of files and a lot of folders. Right, way more than what you could see on one screen at a time. So that could be another one where maybe I'll take that and pipe that to less. And like, well, now I can go through all the folders one at a time, take a look for the thing that I'm looking for and see is it actually here, and kind of visually compare stuff as I go through the data. And when I'm all done, when I want to quit out of less mode, I can just press the Q on the keyboard and okay, great. Now I'm out of this. So knowing about less more does something similar as well, but I think less is a little bit more flexible. So I prefer to show the less command. Okay. Another useful command when you start having lots of data, something like the group file, for example, right? When we had this cat-out /etc/group, when you start having lots of lines of data, sometimes you're only interested in specific lines of data. And so it also becomes useful to say, well, how can I start finding specific things within a file? And so I'd like to show one of the simplest commands for searching through files for text, for matching specific types of text in a file. Okay, and that's the grep command, grep, G-R-E-P, grep. Okay, so grep is a way that you can search for only specific characters in a file. And I'll show a real simple example right now. And in some future content, I'll show more advanced techniques using grep, as well as more advanced commands. Grep is a relatively simple, straightforward. It's kind of like a hammer. It can't do everything, but it's a pretty good blunt tool for looking for stuff. So let's say I wanted to look through my group command or my group file, that /etc/group, but I only care about the things that actually are related to the sandbox user. All right, so the way the grep command would work is you could type grep space and then say, what's the thing that you're searching for? It's like, well, I'm searching for sandbox. And now where are you searching this out of? I'm looking for all the lines that say sandbox out of /etc/group. Let's give that a try. Grep sandbox /etc/group. It's like, well, there they are. So now only the lines out of this /etc/group that actually contain the letters sandbox, those are the only ones that are going to show up. So it's like, yeah, there they are. There's all the groups that the sandbox user was a part of, and of course you've got the sandbox group itself. Like, yeah, that's what we got. All right, so the grep command, really useful for being able to do a real quick kind of text filtering for stuff when you're looking at files. You could do this out of the shadow file, right? What happens if we try doing this out of the shadow file? Like, I only want the output that has the sandbox user out of the shadow file. Let's see how this is going to work, right? And of course, if we run it this way, is this actually going to work? If I try to grep, I'll do the actual sandbox. I'll type out the full name. I won't just type sand. All right, and it's like, don't forget sudo, right? Don't forget sudo. You got your commands. Always make sure if this requires elevated permissions to look at, yeah, grep is going to look at it. You gotta include sudo in order for that to work. So yes, we type grep now. We've got sudo grep sandbox /etc/shadow. And it's like, that's it. There's the one line of data that had the sandbox characters that were a part of it. And I didn't have to see all the rest of those other characters. All right, so it's a really quick way that if I just wanted to grab information related to one user, it's like, well, then just match the characters. If you match the characters, then it'll show up. Now, I will kind of caution this. Let's see if this will work maybe with the Bob user. If I try doing something like grep of Bob out of /etc/group, let's see what this does. It's like, oh, nope, that one was specific enough that we were able to get just Bob. We do have to be a little bit careful here because if you're too vague, realize it could start matching other patterns. All right, in other words, what if I just grep for the letter O? All right, I'm going to grep for the letter O out of /etc/group. It's like, well, there's actually a lot of lines that contain the letter O. It's not like it just has to be the single character O. All right, so anywhere where it matches the pattern, it's going to pick it up. So if you had the word Bob contained inside some other existing word, realize that it will match that as well. And yes, there are ways about being more specific and restricting that. Not things I want to get into just yet. Like I said, when we have some more advanced searching and filtering and refining of our data, then yeah, we'll take a look at how we can start being a little bit more specific. But at least right now, I'm trying to introduce this basic tool of searching for data. Realize you could also use the grep command not to directly grep through a file, but grep can also receive data coming from other commands. So let's say I had some command like the cat command, like I could cat out /etc/passwd, like there's a bunch of data. So if you wanted to look for a specific line out of the output of another command, you could do that as well. All right, and again, this is where we could use the pipe. So if I had a file that had a whole bunch of data, right, here is all the output, I could take all that output and I could pipe that to grep. And then grep, you have to say, well, grep, what is it that you're going to look for? Maybe again, I'll look for anything that has the word sandbox. Okay, so now I'm taking all that output coming from the cat command and sending it to the grep command instead. And now grep takes a moment to actually filter things down and says, well, out of everything you just had, here was the only line that actually contained the letter sandbox. Okay, so we're starting to realize here that when you start piping information from one command to another, two really important things happen. Number one, you don't have to provide a reference of what is it that you're grepping. It knows that the information is coming from the previous command. All right, so we didn't have to list a file path to what is it that we're grepping. All right, we didn't have to list a file path to what is it that we're sending to the less command. The pipe tells it this is where the data is coming from. It's coming from the previous command. The other thing that happens as soon as you start being able to do this is, how powerful are you with a variety of commands? How well can you start using the commands together? I'm going to use the cat command to see some data. I'm going to use the grep command to filter the data. I'm going to use the redirect to then go save this to a file. Maybe we'll try that real quick, right? Like I could cat out, we'll do a sudo cat, I'll cat out /etc/shadow, right? So we know that'll just spit out all the information in our shadow file, but I'll refine it down to only the line that actually had the sandbox user, right? So then I'll do a grep for sandbox. And then from here, I could take the results, right? So here's my results if I did this. It's like, well, what if I wanted to take the results and actually save them somewhere? So maybe I'll save them to some file called, maybe I'll put it in here like, sandbox hash or something like that, cracked sandbox hash, something like that. And I'll put it here on my desktop. So I'll say it's in /home/sandbox/desktop/ and then I'll come up with some new file that I'm just kind of making this up, like cracked hash, something like that. All right, and so now the output did not come here to the terminal. That refined output is now here on my desktop. It's like there's the cracked hash output, right? And I could cat this out. I could cat out my cracked hash output, and it's like, there we go. All right, so starting to combine how well can I use commands together, this is when you start to really hopefully realize the power of what you can do with Bash if you can become more proficient using these commands. Using these redirects, piping data from one command to another is a very, very powerful thing. Takes experience, takes practice. Try out practicing these things, understanding permissions, who has sudo, who doesn't have sudo, what are the groups, how can I go through and look at the permissions on a file and manage some of the permissions. Yeah, it takes a lot of practice, but very critical to being able to manage the little parts of security. And definitely this is something that, attackers, they're going to mess with this stuff. Attackers know how to do this stuff. The attackers know how to do this stuff, so you as the defender, you also have to know how to do this stuff, so then you can defeat them. So, okay, great.